Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome, dear friends, to Kardec Radio at 7 p.m. here in our Friday Inspirational Talk. You're welcome to join us at the Spiritism out of Virginia. This is our public meeting, though we have our Sunday meetings now presentially, and for some, the possibility of doing the Zoom online. We are still offering the online Friday Inspirational Talks. People may ask, why do we do this? Well, it matches the topic. It's out of our free will. We do it because it's so good to learn, and it's so important to learn the features of life, the laws of life for immortality. This is an investment in our immortality. Everything you and I are doing right here, right now, during this hour, learning the immortal lessons of Spiritism, will be an investment for lives to come. It's never a waste. What is a waste? To be at the couch doing nothing, or watching something that is not really uplifting, or 10,000 things that you know that do not add, like surfing the internet to buy something we never buy, or surfing to just browse through possibilities that we never end up embracing, wasting the very talisman of life. As Jesus says, and it's reported by Neil Lawson in the book, Jesus in the Room. To begin this, we will ask the help of our dear friend Carol Correa to join us in reading a message that shall bring us to this moment, to be very mindful. It's a practice of mind over matter, keeping the body still so we can delve within and really bring about our true nature, our spiritual nature. So here's Carol with us. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are going to read message 45 of the book Living Spring by Emmanuel through Chico Xavier. The message is entitled, Only in This Way. In this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit. Thus you will be my disciples. Jesus, John 15:8. Emmanuel comments on this Bible quote as follows. In our times of affliction, the Father is invoked. In times of joy, he is worshipped. On stormy nights, he is anxiously longed for. On festive days, he is solemnly revered. Praised by his thankful children and forgotten by ingrates, the Father always gives, spreading the blessings of his infinite goodness amongst the good and the bad, the just and the unjust. He teaches the worm to crawl, the bush to grow, and the human being to think. Nonetheless, no one should have any doubt about what the Supreme Lord expects of us. From one lifetime to the next, he helps us to grow and to serve him, so that someday we may become part of his divine love and glorify him. However, we will never arrive at such a condition simply by means of 1,000 bright hues of sentiments and reasoning. Our higher ideals are indispensable, and at heart, They resemble the most beautiful and fragrant flowers of a tree. Our learning is essential, of course, and in essence, it comprises the robustness of the respectful trunk. Our lofty aspirations are precious and necessary as they represent the living and promising leaves. All these requirements are imperative for the harvest. The same happens in the fields of the soul. Only when we open ourselves to the Father's decrees of universal love, working for the eternal good, can we glorify Him. To that end, the Master was clear in his statement. May our activity on life's journey produce much fruit of peace and wisdom, love and hope, faith and joy, justice and mercy in a constant and worthy personal endeavor, for that is the only way we can glorify the Father, and the only condition in which we can be disciples of the crucified and resurrected Master. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Carol. And now we invite everyone for our prayer. Let us not forget that prayer is not a ritual. It is true communication with God. We raise our thoughts to you, God, and express our gratitude for life. You've created us all. How can we be indifferent to your creation? Forgive us. Forgive our thoughtlessness, our ignorance, our shadow, for we want light, illumination, but not this selfish light that only brightens our lives, but the one in which many are receiving. We feel your loving grace and your providence, and we recognize that nothing lacks us. Nothing lacks for us, nothing. It's only an illusion, for we're the ones who voluntarily create expectations and ideals that are not best for us. You've given us the best people to be in our relationships, the best resources for us to use and multiply, and the best opportunities for all of us to cultivate like a garden, like a diligent, devoted garden of your love. May tonight be a true opportunity in which we dedicate ourselves to this moment, a moment of deep nourishment, when the spirit doctors, nurses, and therapists find in us open hearts and open minds to receive the treatment that we need, as well as our loved ones, everyone in our homes, in our spiritual network. And we pray especially for those who have their names in the book of prayer at the Spiritism Society of Virginia, at Card Deck Radio. May everyone receive the loving visit of the spirit doctors and bring them relief, remedy, consolation, and hope. We know life is good and we enjoy every minute of it, hoping that the population of the earth in two realms feel your presence and rejoice because you love us unconditionally. Feeling your presence, asking for your protection, for your guidance through our friend and guest speaker, Luiz Lima. May we embrace the call to wiser administration of our lives. And so be it. Right. So here we are. We have here with us our friend Luiz Lima from Florida. Thank you, Luiz, for being here with us. He's also a host at Card Deck Radio, doing the beautiful work, Spiritism, A Closer Look. And he has been doing several works through the internet and also at the Spiritist Center, especially the local center near him, Love and Charity. Right, Luiz?
That's right. Well, thank you very much for having us and this opportunity to be here with all our friends online, all connected together somehow in the spirit world, in the name of Jesus. So it's a great honor to be here. Thank you so much.
And Luiz, it's so interesting because right now we're still living another wave of the pandemic in the US.
Yeah.
And there is much to talk about free will. And I know you're going to talk about free will from the Spiritist perspective, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. It's we're going through one of these times, very challenging times, by the way. And free will has a lot to do with that. So what we want to do here is bring some ideas, some general ideas that we can lay on the table and take a look at the Spiritist view on these things. So that's the purpose for tonight's talk.
All right. So we're all yours, Luiz.
All mine. Okay. All right. So we're going to share some slides here with you. So during our talk here, we're going to speak about several different things, a little bit of science, a little bit of philosophy, because it's a broad subject. So you see here on the screen, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to address genetics, moral standards, neuroscience. With neuroscience, the latest developments, what do they say about free will? That would be an interesting thing to see under the materialistic paradigm. What is free will for them? How does it work? Does it work or not? So because we're going to have to establish, or at least that's the purpose tonight, establish a parallel between two paradigms, Spiritist paradigm or spiritualist in a broader range, and materialistic. We're going to start by comparison. So do we have free will or everything is predetermined? And if you ask around 7 billion people, you're going to have 7 billion different answers because you're going to have different percentages. So some people are going to say, well, we have 30% free will and 70% determinism. So, and other people are going to think it's different. So that's our starting point. One interesting survey that took place in 2014, it's a little bit behind, it's 7 years old, but I think still applies in general conditions. It still applies. So this very famous magazine here in the US, Scientific American, they went out and did a survey, and the survey had this one question: do we have free will? 2 possible answers, yes or no, that's all. So these are the results. So about 40% of the people said, yes, we do have free will, and 60% of the people said, no, we don't, everything is preset. This is here in the US. The research was limited to the US. So if we look at this, it's not really neck to neck, but it's not, one is not too far from the other. So we wanted to start by looking at this. If we look at this, we would need to analyze two things: talk and analyze determinism, talk and analyze about free will, and then come to a conclusion. And that's what we are going to do tonight. So we are going to start with mentioning that at the highest possible level of free will is God. There's nothing more free will than God, because it's the supreme intelligence, first cause of all things. So God is where 100% of free will lies. If we come down, in considering the level of consciousness, so we come down from God to the angels, humans, animals, plants, and as the level of consciousness comes down from the top, also does the perception of free will. So we think, for example, that within the humans kingdom, within the hominal kingdom, we think that some people have more free will than others. That generates revolt, by the way, but that's a different story. We're going to talk about this. But if you look at the kingdoms outside the black box, it makes sense, because what kind of free will does, for example, a plant has compared to us? Almost none. And the animals have a little bit more, but less than us, and so on and so on and so. So it is related somehow directly to the level of consciousness of the spirit. That becomes interesting, because more advanced spirits will have, we're going to talk about this, we're going to get into details, but more advanced spirits will have the perception of more free will than the others. That's very interesting. In order to understand how we got to this point where there are different perceptions about free will and determinism and all of that, we're going to go back to the very beginning. And the very beginning might be very surprising for a lot of people. If we look again at these, the kingdoms, all right, so we have several kingdoms: minerals, plants, animals, hominals, and angelical. As every kingdom comes along, there's a new attribute that is added to the kingdom. For example, the minerals, the best attribute is attraction. For plants, sensitivity, okay? Then there's one for animals, some for animals, some for hominals, some for angelical. When we get to the animals kingdom, there is one particular attribute that is of interest for us tonight. It's called instinct of preservation. However, this instinct of preservation populates the hominal kingdom as well. It propagates over to the next kingdom, us. We do have instinct of preservation, all of us. So when it gets to this, Lan Card Deck is going to tell us, well, in order for this instinct of preservation to be used in a different way that it is used by animals, we received two things that came along with that. And that might be very surprising. One is pride, and the other is selfishness. Selfish. And then it sounds a little bit strange, but this is what it is. Let's put a situation so we can get to the bottom of this and understand. Because today, in 2021, if you mention the word pride, if you mention the word selfishness, the understanding is different than in the very beginning. Let's say, for example, that you are in a classroom with, let's say, 10 people, okay? 10 people in a classroom, and suddenly, okay, the door opens up and a hungry lion comes in. Yeah, the lion, the animal, yeah. It comes in. What are we gonna do? So if it comes in from one corner, most likely we're gonna run to diagonally opposed to the other corner. And that's the first thing we're gonna do without thinking. You see, at this moment, this fraction, this nanosecond, When I go away from the lion, I'm only thinking about myself. After I made it to the corner, then I'm going to say, oh my God, I can help this person, I can help that person. Hey, you come here. And so, but that's after I took care of myself and myself alone in this situation. Same for pride. So I'm on the corner now. I was able to, in principle, to get away from the lion. Now I'm going to start thinking, what am I going to do? So there's going to be some sort of strategy that I have to put together to get away from the situation. So I'm going to say to myself, hold on. I'm better than this guy. I'm going to make it. I'm going to be able to make it. I'm going to get away from here alive. You see, that's the idea of pride. But this pride and this selfishness are this much, not what they mean in 2021. It's the seed of what one day became pride as we know, selfishness as we know. This is very interesting. So we do need pride and we do need selfishness as mechanisms of preservation, instinct of preservation. And then in order to use these two tools, because now pride and selfishness, they became tools, okay, that go along with instinct of preservation. In order for us to use this thing correctly, we receive it like a faucet that controls it. Too much is going to be a problem. Too little is going to be a problem. So there's a faucet that controls it. That faucet is free will. Too much free will, I'm going to be an extremely prideful person, extremely selfish, and I'm not going to have even a good life. I'm going to do everything wrong. Everything's going to be disturbing. It's going to be a lost incarnation, if you will. Too little of this. I don't care for what I do for my body. I don't care for if somebody wants to kill me. So I'm forgetting the idea of preservation. So free will is this faucet that we need to learn how to use it to turn things to one side and or to the other side. Now I need a little bit more of free will. Now I need a little bit less. It's something to be used wisely. So it requires training. It requires learning. It requires a long, long, long time of learning, translated in many, 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 many lifetimes or incarnations. This is how Lan Card Deck tells us this graphic that you see here. I put in a graphic form because I think it's a little bit, more interesting visually to see it. But here's the original text. Selfishness and pride are born from a natural feeling, the instinct of preservation. All instincts have their reason to be and their usefulness because God can't have done anything useless. He did not create evil. Man is the one who produced it, abusing the gifts of God by his free will. Meaning, we open the faucet way too much. Contained within fair limits, that feeling, free will, is good in itself, good and needed in itself, right? Exaggeration is what makes it harmful and pernicious. That's very interesting. Because when we talk about when we use the words pride, prideful, selfishness, we think about, the exaggeration to the max. And it's not really that. It should be used in a more controllable way as a form of preservation, instinct of preservation. So I wanted to bring this here as a starting point within Spiritism because it's one of these phrases. It's one of these things that, you take to your pillow tonight. Right? You take to the pillow tonight and you think about it before you actually go over to the other side, right? So just think about it for 5-10 minutes. Incredible how something simple, I'm going to use the word innocent, was given to us and what we did with that. Okay. All right, let's keep going here. So that's to get started on Spiritism. Let's look at the other side. So we're doing a kind of an analysis between free will and determinism. So let's go over to the other side a little bit. Determinism. Let's look at some historical references. We're going to start with Newton. Okay, Isaac Newton. Of course, his work is phenomenal. We couldn't even be where we are today in terms of technology if it wasn't for him. So nobody questions, his work, his ability, his genius, right? Nobody's going to question that. However, Newton had one big question in his mind. And the question is this: how does the universe work? Let's stop here for a minute. Let's say that I ask you, my friends, Spiritists, and let's say I meet one of you face to face, and I say, "Oh, what do you think? How does the universe work?" I'm expecting you to tell me something more or less along these lines. Well, there's a God, there's a universe, there's several things and spirits and people live in. That's what I expect from you, a spiritist, a spiritualist. Now go to find an astronomer and ask him, how does the universe work? It's the same question. The answer is not going to be the same. The answer is, oh, there are several planets. Each planet has a mass, and there's gravity, and there's attraction between them, and there are comets. It's completely different. Newton was not concerned with the part that touches the intelligent principle. That wasn't his quest. It was never his idea to study that. So when he comes with his theory and everything that he did and produces all the answers that he was able to, a lot of us on the other side, spiritists, spiritualists, will say, oh, he was a materialist. Yes, but he never said, I'm going to seek for God and I found this. So it needs to be understood, okay? So let's stay within his paradigm so we can follow what I'm going to say. So he's looking for an answer that is totally dependent on the material world. He comes with three concepts. Materialism is the first of all, because he's looking for matter. He's looking for planets and comets and, satellites and all of that. Number two, reductionism. Reductionism is this idea the universe is huge, 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 huge. So let's go in parts. We're going to take a small part. Let's say the solar system. Okay, now I got the solar system, but it's still too big. So let's take one planet, Earth. Well, but Earth has the moon with that. So you start reducing things. And so things are composed of pieces and parts. And you break it apart until you get to the bottom of what you want to get to. And number three, for example, this is very typical today. You go to a doctor, for example, and you complain, I have a certain pain somewhere. Let's say it's in the area of your liver, for example. So he's gonna, a classic medicine from years ago will take parts and pieces. So it's gonna look at the liver without looking at anything else at all. To the point that if that liver is not working well, we're gonna replace it. It's called transplant. But it's a reductionist line of thought. Determinism for Newton is when we understand something, we can tell what's going to happen. Okay, for example, meteorology. It's something that we know a lot, really, but not everything. Sometimes we do not expect a tornado and it shows up. So we are not able to produce 100% of the explanation on that. So we haven't learned anything at all. So those are the three things that Newton came up with. So we are here with Newton, we are pending to a materialistic paradigm. After him comes along John Dalton, who was the first guy to dive more into studying the atoms. Again, this is the study of matter. There is no God here because that's not his purpose. Dalton takes what Newton had taught or brought to us and emphasizes that. And then comes Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin is one of these before and after events in humanity because before Darwin, the provider of the truth was the church. You didn't know a thing, you would ask the church. You would ask your priest, your whatever, bishop. They would tell you what the truth is. But there was a point where whatever question you had, the answer from the church was all the same. You shouldn't ask this. This is not something you should ask. You cannot ask this. So the answer became the same, and there wasn't really an answer. It was more like an excuse. When Darwin came along with his work on the origin of the species and all his research, the answers that we had started to show up. Certain answers about evolution and monkeys and giraffes with the long neck, and so that kind of thing started to show up, and it started to challenge the church. So in 1859, a little bit after that, the provider of the truth changes hands from the church to the science. And it still is today. The current provider of the truth still today is the science. And it became with Charles Darwin. You see, it's still within the paradigm, the materialistic paradigm. 1953, more recent times here, right here in New York, James Watson and Francis Crick discovered the structure of the DNA, right? And that's an interesting thing because what they brought was understood in a way that made us make a turn away, totally away from anything that's not matter, not material. Let's try to see what they did here. When they, first of all, if you're looking for a DNA in the middle of a bunch of proteins moving around in a microscope, first of all, the microscope in 1953 is not the same we have today. So you're looking for a needle in the middle of hay, pile of hay. It's very hard. How do you find the DNA? You find the same way you find the needle. You pick up a little bit of hay and say, oh, it's not here. Then you throw it out. You pick another bit, it's not here. You throw it out. At one point, you're going to get to the needle. That's what they did. They started to separate what they thought it was not the DNA, and they got to the DNA. When they got to the DNA, they had to make an assumption to be able to explain what they found. That assumption came to be known as, and these are not my words, are theirs, okay? Central dogma of the molecular biology. Oh, we put our hands up. Oh, dogma in science, the word dogma coming from a scientist. Yes, that's what they did because they didn't find a better term. So they call this thing a central dogma of the molecular biology, which means we are born this way and nothing changes. We cannot change our genes. That's it. Once we have our genes the way it is, our genetics will not change. When you put this together with the ideas of Newton, okay, you put this in the blender, turn on the blender, okay, what comes out is something called genetic determinism. What is genetic determinism? It is, I'm held captive on my genes. That's what it means. So if I was born aggressive, there is no point in trying to get better because it's in my genes. So I don't care. That's what genetic determinism is. Very bad. But that's what we made out of putting these two things in a blender. And that's still very alive in our society. The idea of there is genetic determinism. I'm held captive of my genes. It's still very much alive. A few years later, with the idea of genetic determinism, and that's about 50 years later, we started something that came to be known as the Human Genome Project, which is another interesting thing. What is the Human Genome Project? It's the idea that we are going to catalog all of our genes. Each gene is doing one thing in there. There's a reason for each gene. We're going to categorize or catalog every one of them, and we're going to know what they're doing. So if we are able to know what they do, I'm able to change them. So what they expected is this. The human body produces about 150,000 proteins. The assumption, we know the assumption was wrong now, but at the time, the assumption was each gene produces, tells how one protein is produced, 1 to 1. So they expected to find about 150,000 genes because we had about 150,000 proteins in our bodies. When they started the project trying to catalog those genes, we only got to 25,000. So now we got a problem, because if I have 25,000 genes producing 150,000 proteins, there's at least one gene that produces more than one protein, at least one. And how does that one gene know that he has to, right at this second, produce protein A, and the next second produce protein B? The decision doesn't come from the gene itself, it comes from above. So the initial idea that we were going to catalog all these supposedly 150,000 genes and we were going to know what they do, the idea was passed along to commercial companies, drug companies, that they were paying for the research in such a way that in return, they would be able to exclusively produce medicine that would change certain genes. So for example, let's say I go to my doctor and say, "Doctor, I would love to sing, but I'm a terrible singer." So he would give me a pill, right, that changes my vocal cords genes, and now I'm a great singer. Of course, that's not going to happen. But that was of course, we're exaggerating a little bit, but the idea is that the concept is like that. And it didn't work. So the project was abandoned, and that was the end of genetic determinism. That was the end of it. So those people who subscribed to genetic determinism were kind of, what do we do now? We got to find another thing. They didn't come back. They did not switch sides and came back to the spiritualist paradigm. They didn't. So they were kind of lost. What do we do now, right? Well, let's add one thing to this timeline here in between Charles Darwin and Crick and Watson. We're going to add something that's not from the materialistic paradigm. In 1939, Spirit Emmanuel writes through the hands of Chico Xavier in the Consoler, 1939, okay? That's before the DNA, discovery of the DNA structure. The laws of genetic are presided by numerous psychic agents. So let's stop a little bit. The laws of genetics. Who studies genetics? Science, materialistic. Okay, these laws are presided by numerous psychic agents. Does science study psychic agents? No. So we got a mismatch here, right? So the laws are presided by numerous psychic agents that science on earth is far from formulating due to its materialistic postulates. So for us, for a long time, we have seen the whole thing, the whole picture, from a different angle. So there are clashes, yeah, because the criteria used by us to look at the subject is not the same as theirs. Different criteria produce different outcomes, right? So we will say, no, this is A, B, and C. They're going to say, no, it's not A, B, and C, it's X, Y, Z. Okay, because there's a difference in the criteria used by both sides, let's put it this way. All right, so now we got a little bit into Spiritism, right? We brought Emmanuel into the picture, so let's continue with Spiritism. Let's go back to Lan Card Deck. He is discussing about spiritual influences in one of his writings, and look at what he says. So he's talking about spiritual influences, okay? Through the assimilation of peri-spiritual fluids, the spirit itself, spirit here is the discarnate spirit that's trying to connect to a person, okay? The spirit identifies itself, so to speak, with the person it wants to influence. Okay, no news there, we know that. Not only it transmits thoughts, but can exert a physical action on the person, can make the person act or speak at its will, can make the person say what he wants. It's getting worse, right? To serve, in other words, the person's organs as if they were its own. Serious. He can finally neutralize the actions of the person's own spirit and paralyze the person's free will. Okay, us, spiritists, we look at this, we think of obsession. Yeah, that's what it is, right? When it becomes really extreme, it paralyzes free will to the point where the obsession, the discarnate spirit will tell the person, take the elevator, go up to the ceiling of, to the roof of the building, 30 floors, and jump. And the person will jump, depending on the person, the circumstances. They will obey flatly and blindly. They lost their free will. And I'm going to rephrase, they didn't lose their free will. They have the perception they lost the free will. Free will is still available, still there, but they lost the perception. We don't lose free will. We lose the perception that we have or don't free will. And when you go back to the Spirit's book, starting in question 100, where Lan Card Deck is going to explain about the Spiritist hierarchy, he actually negotiates with the spirits. He goes back to the spirits when he was preparing all of this. And he will say, it would be easier for me to categorize the spirits according to their moral advancement in 10 categories. What do you think? And the spirits say, you can do 10 categories, 15, 20. You can give the names you want. As long as the teachings are preserved, we are okay with that. And then Lan Card Deck creates these 10 categories that you see here from the left to the right, impure, frivolous, and so forth, pure on the right. And he groups these categories in 3 groups. He calls orders. Third order, imperfect. Second order, good. First order, just one category, the pure spirits. Third order spirits need a place such as the earth to live on and develop their spirit, trials and expiations. Because for those, there is predominance of matter over spirit. The material influence is still more significant, a lot more significant than the spirit, the influence of the spirit. This propensity towards evil, ignorance, pride, selfishness, all of these things. There's a light intuition about God, but we do not comprehend it. So spirits like this, I'm going to call red spirits, okay, because of the color you see on the screen. So these red spirits are us, living on planets and orbs like Earth. We are imperfect spirits. On the other hand, second order, good spirits, for them, the predominance is not matter over spirits, the other way around, spirit over matter. They have a constant, not at times, constant desire to do good. So what we see here is, as we go along from left to right, from the impures to the high order spirits, the influence of matter starts to decrease as the spirit develops morally. So for the impures, the impact of the material plan is, let's say, 99.9%, and 0.01% is from the spirit. And it drops as they go along to the point where when you get to the high order spirits, the influence of matter is minimum, almost nothing. But the influence of matter on the pure spirits is inexistent. Not influenced. These are spirits that have absolutely superiority in terms of moral and intellectual development. They reincarnate as a mission. When they need to carry out a mission, they don't need to reincarnate to get rid of the impurities that all the others need to. So, free will, right? We already know that free will depends on the level of moral advancement. So when we look at the scale here, if we come to the left, okay, towards the impures and frivolous, those guys, they think they don't have free will. When you come to the right side, the wise and the high order, they think they have a lot of free will. Because free will attaches to the level of development, moral development. Okay? So then Lan Card Deck asks the spirits in the Spirits book, why are these people not developing all together with the same rate. We all go from simple and ignorance. We all gonna get to perfection, but some of them go very fast, just like that. Some of them take a long time to get there. And the spirits will respond well because they're doing, the spirits that take a long time, they stop along the way all the time to do bad things. It's like I'm walking down the street and I see a nice opportunity to do some bad thing. I stop and do it. I could have been, following along my path, but I'm going to stop and do some bad things. So it delays my progress. So then Allan Kardec said, okay, I understand that, but now I got a question for you. Why have some spirits follow the path of good and others the path of evil? And the answer is a question. Don't they have free will? So it's a choice. They make their own choice. They make their own. God does not create evil spirits at all. It's a choice. We become evil, or those who become evil become at their own leisure. It's not a divine decree that says, you down there, you're going to be an evil person, an evil spirit, and you down there is going to not be an evil spirit. No such a thing. There is no divine decree. So, as we saw here on the Spiritist hierarchy, when you come to the right side, close to the high orders, those spirits, they are happier than us. Of course, they are, much more developed, morally speaking. And they have the impression they have a lot of free will. That's their perception. So we can understand the thing like this. The more selfish I am, the less free will I think I have. Or the more selfish I am, the more I think things are all determined. I don't have control over anything. The less selfish, the more free will, the happier I am. So these people, the happy people, those who think they have free will, they are not selfish, they are good spirits, second order spirits, to say the least. These are the ones, in prayer all the time. These are the ones with a divine connection in mind all the time. They're always doing good. They're always helping people. They're always taking care of others. These are these happy faces that believe they have a lot of free will. Okay, for example, let's say you're looking at this image here, right? Let's say you want to do some good and you're a happy spirit. You're really a morally advanced spirit and you really want to do some good. What do? You just do it. I got free will to do, I'm going to do it. An impure spirit, or the red spirits, are going to look at the situation. Oh, this friend of mine, he needs some help. I could help him. Okay, how can I do this? What am I going to get on search? Okay, let me see. If I do this, well, no, maybe that's not a good time to help him. That's not free will. Free will is I'm doing it. It's not, let me see if I'm going to do, let me think about it, let me analyze my situation. That's not free will. On the other hand of the side, on the other side of this, we have those spirits who are the problem spirits. These are spirits doing things that are, for the other side, unbelievable. They do things that are, at times, very hard to comprehend, revolting at times, very difficult for all the others to understand why they are doing this. But think about this. For you to get to one of these three things that you see here on the screen, it is what I call the last shot. They have gone in their minds through everything possible, and they came with the following solution. There is only one way, and they do it. They execute that one only way they found to be, to take care of the situation. There is only one way. They are so selfish that they can't see anything else except their one only way to do things. We're going to come back to this idea a little later. Free will, okay, brings personal and collective responsibility. Here's our Lan Card Deck about personal responsibility. When the spirit incarnates, it brings predispositions with it. And if we accept the idea that there is a corresponding area in the brain for each of them, then the development of these areas will be seen as an effect, not a cause. The spirit brings, the intelligent principle brings these predispositions. And the body is going to follow those things. It's not the other way around. And again, Spirit's book about free will and collective responsibility. I love this question. I absolutely love this question, 848. Does the distortion of the intellectual faculties because of drunkenness excuse reprehensible acts? Let's make it easier, a better vocabulary. I drank 10 glasses, I took my car, and I hit 10 people and I killed 10 people. Okay, am I, to be responsible for it or not? Of course I am. You see, it's an easy thing. Did I go to the bar or the bar came to me? If you think you went to the bar, you're responsible for it. If you think the bar came to your house, right, suddenly, miraculously, it doesn't happen. It's us making it happen. And another thing about collective responsibility, children. So the spirits will establish that children, they do have free will, but they don't know how to use yet. So in the early days, this is responsibility, and the administration of the free will takes place by their tutors and parents and family members and so on. So free will has to do with myself and all the others. It's personal and collective responsibility. I want to give you one last look before we close into what science says today about free will. There's a very interesting book by Jeffrey Schwartz. Jeffrey Schwartz, he wrote a book called The Mind and the Brain. In this book, he relates a very known experience in the field from the 80s, 1985 and so. We're not going to get into describing everything, but this is the general idea. If you tell a person to move their finger, okay, and you try to manage what happens in the brain, this is what they have found out. So the action is, I moved my finger. Somebody told me, move your finger, and I moved my finger. So that's what I call the action. When the thing is actually took place, the movement was executed. We found out that before that, the brain became conscious about that. So there is a delay between the time that the brain becomes conscious and sends signals to the muscles of my finger so I can do the movement. There's a delay in there. And they found out more. Before the brain becomes aware of it, there's something called readiness potential, in which we can detect brain waves that are going to make it happen. We found that between the readiness potential and the action, there's 550 milliseconds. And between the awareness, meaning when the brain becomes aware of it, and the actual movement, there's a delay of 200 milliseconds. What we know today, this research comes from studying OCDs, okay? What we know today is those 200 milliseconds, within that time frame, there's a possibility for veto the action. So the brain is going to send the signals to my finger so I can do this. But I have the possibility to override that. And I have 200 milliseconds to do that. If that's possible, it's because the brain is wired for free will. I can change what I was told to do. In science, it's possibility of veto. When you think about the concept, is how the brain is wired for free will. I still have control. The obsessor can tell me, go up to the roof of the building and jump. But I still can say no, even if I'm already there at the top, at the rooftop. I can still say no, I gave up. I don't want to do it. So very interesting input from science that help us also understand a little bit. Now, philosophically, think about this. You need to go from point A to point B. And let's say there are 5 paths that you can track to go there. 5 roads, let's put it this way. So you start your journey from this point A going to B. Suddenly, in the middle of the way, right, you meet somebody, and for some reason, you guys get into a disagreement. So it didn't go well. So you say, I'm not going to continue. That's it. I can't. This is a bad road. I'm not going to do. I'm going to come back and take a second road. I take a second road. I meet somebody else that brings in me another type of vice. And I, again, become aggressive. They become aggressive. We fight. We don't get into an agreement. And I say, no, this is all wrong. This way, I'm not going to make it to B. I'm going to come back and choose a third route, third path. And the same thing is going to happen. There's a very famous book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. In the words of Lan Card Deck, we take heaven and hell with us all the time. Our heaven or our hell. So path number 3 is no good. I'm going to try another one, number 4. And then it's going to be trouble again. So there's going to be a time where I say, okay, I've tried I've tried path number 1, 2, 3, and 4. There is only one way for me to do this. There is only one way. You see, there isn't only one way. There's still 5 ways. But I have the perception that I lost my free will, and I'm determined and limited to follow path number 5 because the first 4 are no good. The first 4 are equally good. I lost the perception of not having free will, or at least that's what I thought so. Free will is a perception. It's not a fact. The fact is everybody has free will. We perceive to have it or not. And it depends on our level of moral advancement. People in the red, in the far red, will perceive no free will. I can't do anything. People on the far right, the green guys, they're going to say, well, yeah, I can do things. I can do everything. So at the end, okay, we want to go from red to yellow here. Going from red to yellow, and it's a path, it's a process. It's called moral transformation. And that's something that is at the core and the root of the teachings of Spiritism, because that came from the master and the one who guided everything in all of us. It's called Jesus Christ. So that's what I wanted to talk to you, to bring to you. So hopefully we were able to contribute with some information. And I gave you a phrase to take to the pillow tonight. Don't forget that, okay?
All right. You know, I was like the computer, speechless, because I have to say, it's such a beautiful study that you have presented, Luis, because reading the literature is not enough. You have to study it. And the way you compile it, the way the breakdown really clarifies why people know of this and we don't practice it. It's clear. It's very helpful in when we talk about in psychology about changes, the inner shift as they call. We say, why don't we change so easily? Because people don't know they can. Today, somebody asked me, do you think I am this way because of my genes? So it's so interesting because majority of people on earth, they think I am who I am and I won't change. I may change eventually. Even spiritists say to me, I may change eventually, but I think it's just the way I am.
Yeah.
And as you said, the beautiful breakdown showing the level of evolution and that awareness, that change in perception is really the transformative factor here in the study that you presented. I'm going to bring also Carol and Daisy to join us in this conversation. Okay? Bear with me because my computer today is acting out.
The computer doesn't have free will.
Yeah, that is a sure thing. The computer has zero free will. But we do. We do. I can choose what I feel. I can choose what I think. I can choose everything. And the question is, how am I making these choices? Because majority of us are simply reacting. So I loved when you talked about reactivity and the level of evolution and the lack of perception in that regard. Kara and Daisy, you can open your mics and participate too, talking about your impressions or questions. And friends who are here, thank you, Daniel and Michelle and Abad, Ahmed, Narciso, John, and other friends. Feel free to ask your questions to Luiz as well, friends.
It was very interesting, Luiz, how you showed us the connection between our lack of awareness of free will and our animalistic tendencies, and how we are incarnated as human beings living connected to a human body in order to develop greater discernment and greater awareness of the range of choices that were divinely granted to us. You brought such an insightful lenses through which we can understand our pathway towards evolution. It reminded me of evolution in two worlds, actually, showing us how we progress and how this is perhaps the most precious reincarnation of ours, because we are developing, thanks to Spiritism, much greater awareness as to why we are reincarnated. So
Yeah, I think it has to do. It has to do a lot with evolution. I think. Yeah, like I said, free will is a perception. Those who are, less advanced, they perceive they have no free will. That's what they think. Free will is a fact.
it is no wonder that Emmanuel, who is much more evolved than we are, already recommended in the book Thought and Life, chapter 10, that we use our free will to seek the good, visualize the good, feel the good, think the good, and mold the good with all the resources that we have at hand. So here's someone who modeled himself after Master Jesus already and is giving us the GPS that we need to guide our free will towards the ultimate good.
Yeah, to me, I think let's say inability to see free will or inability to perceive free will has to do with our vices. Like I said, I'm not going to follow this road anymore because I don't like that person. That doesn't mean that the road is blocked. You blocked it. You perceive that as a problem, but there is no problem there. It's still a valid path. Yeah. So that's, I think.
Thank you for taking all of us out of the victim role and granting us the awareness that we are responsible for the lives that we are building, because what we do today kind of co-creates our lives yet to come. So thank you for the sense of divine responsibility.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis, for bringing this inspirational talk today. And as Carol was mentioning, I was thinking about Emmanuel's book, Thought and Life, throughout your presentation, where he says that our brain has several compartments, but the will presides over everything. So as you're saying, as we evolve, we really learn how to use the will and really align it to God's will so that we can then, fulfill our reincarnatory plan, but aligning ourselves with God's will. So thank you so much. And I love the graphs as we evolve and our perception of free will really expands and it's as we march towards the planet of regeneration, that's where we want us. So we need to practice, as Carol said, using our will for the good every day. So thank you so much, Luis.
You're welcome. One thing that was important for me when I was developing this, like 15 years ago or so, when I started to, get more of the idea, I need to understand free will better. That was 15 years ago. What came to me at the time is I had a really hard time understanding people who would say, and I mentioned that, right? Who would say something like this: there is only a way to do this thing, and this is the only way. And I would listen to that person and look at things and say, but there's at least these 3 more ways to do that. I'm looking at them. And then my question to myself is, why am I seeing no limitation in these other possibilities, and this person is not seeing the limitation? We still respect the person. We got to respect, each one has its own things to deal with. But that's how I started getting into this. And then it started to come to me as, well, the people who are saying there's only way, they are down to, they eliminated all the other possibilities by choice, not by divine decree. So it's the number and the consecutive choices that you do that are blocking the path. And then you get to a final, there's only one way. When there is no way, you get to suicides and stuff like that. So that's how I got into this.
So, Luis, as you are talking about free will, there are people who claim during this pandemic, oh, I'm stuck. Nothing moves forward. I'm stuck. What would you say based on the study from free will?
Well, regardless of the situation, if somebody telling to themselves, I'm stuck, that's already a limitation. So all the other possibilities have been eliminated by that one person. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter, but they have been eliminated. And if these people do not open up to say, well, let me hear other people telling me which other possibilities are out there. You can deny that too by choice. I said, I don't want to hear you. I don't want to know your point of view. I'm right and that's it. And we're not going to argue. We're not going to discuss. We're not even talking about that anymore. It's still a choice. So the more you know, the better you are qualified by yourself to make a smarter decision, a smarter choices, I would say. So yeah, the pandemic brings different things, different perspectives. So let's hear everything that's out there and make a decision, make a choice. Let's put everything in perspective. Let's see what all the paths are to go from here to 10 years from now in terms of pandemic. Now there's another thing. All these choices, if we make a choice as a person, you have one outcome. If you make a choice as an immortal spirit, it's another outcome. So that is a problem too. There are people making choices in terms of pandemic as a person. This would be interesting for me in the next 2 months, in the next 6 months, or for this particular lifetime. and I'm too young and I have, I don't know, 7 years to go, or I'm too old and I only have a few years left. So you're thinking as a person, incarnated person, not thinking as an immoral spirit.
So, Luis, one more question. Now from Daniel Pian. He's asking, from your perspective here on Earth, how much of one's personality is derived from DNA, spirit, and environment?
Well, the DNA derives from the spirit. We have the DNA that we have because of our historical, spiritual history. Our spiritual history has take us with all our choices in the past, and wrong and good choices, everything that took us to this point prior to this one lifetime. And when you put everything in perspective, things have to be worked out. Oh, this particular lifetime, I have to work on, let's just say, intolerance. So I'm going to have a DNA that is compatible of me being able to work on intolerance. Or I have to offset some, whatever, I killed somebody last lifetime and I have to offset that for some reason. In order for me to understand what the person went through, and I gave him, let's say, a bullet in the head, I have to have some difficulties in my brain that will remind me of never doing this again. That will be my way of offsetting, understanding, and helping people with brain conditions. So it's the other way around. The DNA follows the spiritual history. It's not that the DNA creates the spirit or a personality. It's the other way around, actually.
Thank you so much, Luis. What a beautiful study, and I would recommend everyone to go back and revisit the whole study, the graphs, and the empowerment within it, because it really brings to us the message like we are who we make of ourselves, and what we see is what we create, what we co-create. Reality is what we make of it. And this is so beautiful because even neuroscience tells us nowadays that our brain will believe what we focus on. So if we, as Carol brought to us in Emmanuel's words in 1958 in a book, Thought and Life, to get rid of this prison of the past, we've been this far, we need to seek the good. Instead of looking at the shadow, let's look at the good. But if we keep looking at the shadow, like somebody told me the other day, really, an adult, she said, you know, the other day I was scared of my shadow. And I was like, really? Because I thought that only happened to children. She said, no, I was scared of my own shadow the other day. And I said, oh my gosh. So we really need to focus on the light, focus on the good, and make these voluntary choices. As you say, we have an inbuilt system that science doesn't explain much yet. When he talks about free will, science is really like, I don't know what to make of it, consciousness. But as you presented to us, the spiritist science is ahead, and it makes so much sense that God created us with that ability. Right, Luis? I would like to finalize before the passes and the prayer with your final comment, please.
Yeah, I would encourage people to read about free will, because there's a lot of information throughout the spiritist literature about free will in different books, written in different times by different authors, spiritual authors, and each one they don't bring the same information. They don't bring inconsistent information, not that, but they don't bring the same thing. They're complementary. You read something from one author and you read the next one, it's more, and then more. The more you read, the more you get, until we are able to have this like kind of outside the black box perspective, where we look at free will from a totally different point of view and understand why in humanity we subscribed to the materialistic paradigm. We showed that in the beginning. There are events that took place in our history that led us to believe that everything is materialistic, and we kind of subscribe to that, and we shut down the other possibilities. When you shut down the other possibilities, you automatically reduce your free will, because free will is a perception. And that's what I like to leave with.
Wow. As Daniel Pion says, beautiful, powerful. We're deeply grateful. Thank you so much, Luis, for sharing this. Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you. So now we'll use all this hope that was instilled in us, that was given to us, that was shared from Luis' studies to us, so we can move to the passes. Let's remember that the good spirits are everywhere, and it's a matter of frequency. Our home is open to them. So right now we'll ask our dear Daisy to lead us into the passes and the prayer. Let us really ennoble our feelings. Let us get out of our daily shallow, very shallow, because our daily worries are so shallow. They're very close to the end of the world, the daily survival things. And let us catapult ourselves to the human level and think about, as he said, our guide and model Jesus and his healing approach to us as Daisy leads us into the passage prayer. Right, Daisy?
That's right, Vanessa. So let us then close our eyes and feel the presence of our guardian angels, the illuminated spirits who are assigned to each one of us. Let us open the door of our homes so that they can bring the doctors, nurses, and therapists that we need at this moment. Let us visualize their illuminated hands approaching us and giving us the spiritual passes. We visualize a shower of light coming from the top of our heads, enveloping our whole body as it brings the medicine that we need at this very moment. Peace, understanding, strength, and courage. Let us release any sentiments that do not align to God's law. We release any sentiments of hatred, jealousy, pride. As we breathe in and out, we take in this medicine. As we visualize this team of doctors and nurses placing in our dining room tables a bouquet of lavender flower. Let this bouquet of flowers stay there throughout the week so that it can emanate the healing energies that envelops each our family members, loved ones, our pets and plants. And we see that this light now propagates from our homes, traveling to our neighborhoods, to hospitals where so many are sick and desperate at this moment, to homes where violence and hatred prevails, where people are sick from the body and the soul. We see this light traveling and reaching prisons, shelters, refugee camps, and those who do not have a home and live on the streets. Let us visualize the same group of mentors giving them baskets of healing flowers so that they can feel the embrace of God at this moment. And we now see bridges of peace forming from our countries to each of the continents as we visualize Master Jesus himself enveloping planet Earth. We raise our thoughts. Dear Master Jesus, thank you so much. Thank you for these moments where we are reminded about our free will. We are reminded about our responsibility in this reincarnation as we learn, progress, and evolve. Dear Master, please forgive our still animalistic and reactive decisions in our lives. But you, as a loving masters, always showing us the pathway, and today we receive one additional tool to fulfill the plan that you have from each and every one of us. We pray that we can use our free will to focus on the good, on the light, to make better choices in our lives, leaving the shoes of victim, to really strengthen our will, align with God's, so we can march forward, focus on the good today and always. With much gratitude in our hearts, dear Master, we ask that we can continue in this learning journey as our physical bodies rest this evening, and learning with you throughout our week. And under your guidance and your protection, we now close this meeting of tonight. And so be it.
Thank you so much, friends. Thank you for those who have been with us, and thank you, Luiz, once again. Wonderful having you here, and we'll keep following the studies on Spiritism, a closer look, right? Every Wednesday at 7 p.m., correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Luiz. And we thank everybody also for joining us, for participating, and we hope to see you next time here on Friday Inspirational Talks. For those who are locally, remember, Sunday at 11 a.m. we'll be at the Spirit Side of Virginia presentially. You may come and join us as we're studying under Luiz books, and short talks followed by the passes. Join us. And John the Rose is here with his final touch. Thank God I saw it before we closed. As our moral transformation expands, more free will is given to D, because God trusts so much more in us. All right, that's the breakdown. Thank you so much. We'll keep following the studies. Thank you, friends.